Today we're talking about Seven Impact Message, which is pertinent to the way God is developing emerging and established and even executive level leaders in this day to a new level. And our title for today's talk is Living and Leading Your Vision with Purpose and Everyday Life. Let me repeat that. Living and leading your vision with purpose and everyday life. The reason we are taking such a practical approach to this subject is that we've read far too many books and heard far too many lectures that we were not able to necessarily transfer into our everyday life. And this is a season where there's a lack of good leadership in the earth, and who but the body of Christ should be positioned to step out in leadership with excellence in the chaotic times that we all find ourselves living. We have a choice to make. We can try to blend in. We can put our head under the covers. We can try to avoid conflict and avoid thinking about the things that trouble us. Or we can look them full in the face. We can establish ourselves as God's leaders in the way that He is inviting us to do in this season. And we can show up making a difference. I want to present to you today a way to do that, and it's called the Fields Effect. Now, here's a definition of that. This is the recognition of the destiny of each man or woman as a field to be planted, cultivated, and harvested. The idea behind this comes from a scripture in 1 Corinthians 3:9. Where we read, "For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field. You are God's building." And so I would like for you to think of yourself at this moment, your potential, your future, the things that are stirring in your heart to do, as a field to be developed, to be planted, and yes, to bring a harvest. How many of you know that this is a season where harvest is due? There are many things you've worked on for years, lessons you've been stewing over for decades, dreams in your heart for business ideas, perhaps for innovations or inventions, perhaps a desire to rally people around you to teach them what you know. I find far too many people disqualify themselves as leaders and disqualify themselves as having anything to teach when they're sitting on a huge vault of knowledge and wisdom and the things that are within you that somebody else needs to know. So I would ask you to agree with me on a couple of points for the purposes of our time together. And one would be that you are a field. You are a field of God that He is in the process of developing. Recognize that you have potential beyond what you're working in right now, and that there's more God has for you to learn and more God has for you to teach. So if we view ourselves as a field, then I'm going to push you a little further and ask you to view yourself as a leader believer. Now, I will tell you there are levels of leaders. Some have responsibility for billion-dollar corporations. Others have responsibility for the 3 square feet around their desk as a front desk receptionist. But all, in my estimation, are fields to be developed and leaders in the making. You see, you're all leading someone. It just depends on what you're leading them to do and who they are. There are people watching each of you every day. Maybe in your community, maybe in your church, maybe in your organizations, your business, your city hall. But there are customers coming in, there are clients calling, there are team members looking at you to see how you're going to handle conflict and uncertainty. And so let's just remove the argument that kind of rises up within us naturally that says, "Oh, I'm not sure I'm a leader. I don't know what level of leader I'll be." Well, you know what? That's to be determined. And you have something to do about it. But as long as you resist it, you'll be staving off your future progress that is possible when you view yourself as a leader and one as a field to be developed. So can we agree on that? You are a leader believer and you are a field to be developed. So the Fields effect, what's behind that name? Well, a couple of things. An effect is the idea that if we take certain actions, they will bring about particular consequences. And God's principles are evident in nature. They're evident in the work of the fields. And they're evident out in nature in a pasture. Here we're in the Midwest, in the very middle of the Midwest, and we see huge crops and fields planted with corn, and we watch them springing up. And my husband was raised on a rice farm, and he's always very observant about the season and about the crops and about what stage they're in and about what's going on. So in our routine trips here and there, he's always making observations about the land and about the crops. And this is full of analogy that is pertinent for you and for me as we think about how we're going to be developed as a leader. So we're on the subject of the Fields effect, and this is an effect that we're saying is taking certain actions which bring about certain consequences. And we're recognizing the fact that God's principles are evident in the work of the field. So let's move forward here in our slides. Right here, pause a second. We're observing the principles of God's order in nature, and we're going to go from there to another level of this as we advance to the next slide and look at the fact there are principles of sowing and reaping at work. Now, you know this. You've applied it probably in your finances. You've applied it perhaps in raising children. And for today's purposes, we're going to take these lessons and we're going to apply them to the development of a person's life and leadership. And we're focusing on your role in the marketplace. We talk a lot in Seven Impact about men and women in the seven mountains of culture, which include everything from religion to education to government to media, arts, family, the whole gamut. And so the full-time pastor has a place in this journey as a leadership of spiritual development. The full-time business person has a role in bringing forth business and transformation in the work of their hands with their shops and their stores and their manufacturing plants. The people at City Hall making government and putting things in place civically to bring transformation have a huge role. And the benefit of acknowledging these spheres of influence is that we begin to see we all have a lane to run in where we have a primary passion or drawing. And it's in these thoroughfares of life where we come and go, do work, that actually transformation is worked out in the earth. Now, how many of you remember that the whole earth is going to give God glory one day, right? And that's an exciting thought. It's an exciting reality on its way towards us. However, I find we often don't assume any particular ownership of that vision that's on God's heart when it comes to our day-to-day work and what we do Monday through Friday as well as through the weekend. So I hope that you will develop a grid for the purposes of our talk today that says, I have a part in the earth to advance God's glory wherever I am. I have a sphere of primary influence that I'm going to be focusing on. There are principles at work in my life that are set in motion by God's order in the earth, and they don't just apply to the crops of the field, but they apply to my very life and my very development as a leader. So that's what we call the Fields effect. So moving on here, what we want to do next is talk about a little personal note I'm going to insert. My name happens to be Linda Fields because I married Rick Fields. And he's the guy my mom and I knelt down by the bed and prayed for when I was a little girl before we knew there was such a person as Rick Fields. And the fact that my name is Fields now is I've always loved that name. I've always loved the sound of it. I love the guy that brought it to me. But there's also something in that effect that has occurred in my work as I have worked through corporate training initiatives, through educational initiatives, through ministry initiatives, where people have coined a little term when they talk about me. And they say, well, first of all, here's what they really say. They say, don't go to her if you want a pity party. That's just what they say, because what they'll get is an experience where they call it a kick in love. They did put in love on there, but in other words, we're going to see where you are. We're going to find out where you need to go with your business or your initiatives, and we're going to find a way to get on with it. And so this has become described by my clients and friends as the Fields effect. So we've got a double meaning going on. We're going to plug into God's principles of developing a field, and they're being brought to you by Linda Fields. So let's move on and see how we're going to grow a leader. We're going to learn how to plant your field. We're going to spend time seeing how do you cultivate that field. And yes, how many of you would like to see a harvest? We are not always planting forever. We are not always cultivating forever without expectation of a result, of a harvest. And I have found a bit of a weariness in the body of Christ among leaders who have had dreams and plans and work that they've pursued for many periods of time, many days, months, years, some even decades, where they've not seen the expected result. Now, didn't we say that an effect implies that if you take certain actions, that certain results will occur? That principle is at work here. You have banked a lot of planting, a lot of cultivating. Now, maybe you've abandoned your field in a season of weariness or a season of disappointment, but the way God's order works, there is still a crop to be harvested from the prayers that you've prayed and the work that you've done. And it is my desire that with this teaching going out in the body of Christ and in ministry leaders and in business leaders and other realms of society, that we will see a new breed of leader rise up who says the Lord will be transformed and the world will be transformed and give the Lord glory one day, and I'm going to have a little piece of that action right now. So that's where we're going with the acknowledgement of our lives as a field to be developed. So let's get into that. We're going to focus first on planting your field. And when you plant your field, practically, you've got to put something in the ground that's going to grow. That's what has to happen. And when that happens, there are several things that go into the process. And the next one would be very practically, we have to prepare the field. And so when we're preparing a field, we're going to take a look at the condition of the soil. We're going to see we might do some tests and see what are the nutrients. Is there a need for fertilizer? Is there a need to aerate the ground? There's different ways of preparing a land for receiving a seed. We plow the field. We stir up the fallow ground. And so just as in nature, these things are done to receive the planting of a crop, you and I as leaders need to take responsibility for our own lives to be prepared, that the soil will be ready. So we're going to give you several practical things today that you can do no matter where you are in your leadership development, whether you consider yourself new and emerging, or whether you say, I've been a leader for a while, but I still have things to learn. Or maybe you're one of those who says, I've had wild success, but honestly, I've struggled to see what the bigger picture is, why God's blessed me with these finances and with this success and with this business. And so this applies on all of those levels. So as a leader, to prepare your soil, we've got several bullet points here. You need to just decide now, I'm going to be a lifelong learner. Now, let me just ask a question. Have you ever been in a meeting with a leader who, quote unquote, who thinks they've arrived? They're not open to any more new ideas. They've got it all. You have nothing new to contribute in their eyes. How energizing is that? Very deflating, isn't it? Let's just be honest. And so the days of a person calling themselves a leader when they're not demonstrating the type of leadership that Jesus demonstrated are past. Now, in days gone by, why would we have listened to these leaders? Why did we stick around? What did we think they had that we didn't have? I think part of the unveiling here is that these things are available to all of us, and to the extent that we're willing to go after them. The development is an invitation to you to receive, and one of the ways you step into that big time is to just make the decision intellectually as well as with a posture of humility that you're a lifelong learner, that Jesus always has something to teach us. I love the fact that the Lord never puts us on a shelf and says, that's really all I had for you. Now you can just coast. At every season of my life, and I'll tell you, I usually go to God with a impassioned request for something big, new, and audacious about every 10 years, and He's faithful to deliver. And He's never met me with silence or the message that that's really all I had for you, kiddo. My daddy called me kiddo. It's an affectionate term in our family. And I just happen to have a real personal identification with that love from God that says, I see you, I know everything you've been through, I know the good leaders you've served under, I know those who took advantage of you, I know those that overlooked you, but I see you. And so as a lifelong learner with that posture and with that knowledge, you are ready to grow as a leader to the next level. Now do your prerequisite training. There are some people who think if God's in this, it will just happen and I'll wake up one day and I'll be there. I haven't seen that. It's kind of a thing we might want to believe from time to time, but being a good teacher or a good coach or a good leader, I want to tell you that's really not how God's economy works of developing a field or a leader. You got to put in the work. Work is good. Work is holy. Work includes doing your prerequisite training or your education. And so whatever field you may be in, you may decide to get a certification. You may get a law degree. You may get a medical degree. You may go for professional development training or coaching to work on your people skills. And the skills that you have and bring to the table are awesome, and we're going to tell you how to assess those and determine the gaps where you want to develop an improvement plan. But just make a decision. I'm going to need to learn some things. And so part of my development as a leader is to do the prerequisite training or the education. And practically speaking, you probably need to do a little self-check sheet on personal habits that would set you up for success with learning. What do I mean by that? If you have not engaged yourself in a rigorous development program, you may need to take a look at your time management. You know, we just fill the time, don't we, one way or another? And if we haven't been in a habit of spending certain amounts of time in prayer, certain amounts of time in reading, certain amounts of time in professional development courses, we easily fill our time usually with leisure activities. That may be fine, but I'm saying there's a realignment of your schedule that needs to occur if you're going to go with this. Don't think that you'll get it done at night after you've done all of the other things you've grown accustomed to in a season where you were not going after your leadership development. Also, I'd recommend that your financial resources are in order. I've watched many people stop short of developing their business or their leadership plan because they just did not come to terms with the fact that it was going to cost finances. When I have someone with a dream in their heart working on a business and envisioning all the exciting things they want to do, I often find they haven't done the spreadsheet. They haven't decided, do I need to hire people? Do I need to buy equipment? Do I need to take a course? Do I need to learn a language? Do I need to do some research? Am I going to have to expend some money? And the answer is yes. Whatever you're going to do will require some financial stewardship. So when you go into this, take a good hard look at how you're managing your time, and then also begin to align your financial resources so that you can put your finances in the right place to receive the training and the leadership development you desire. So with all that done, the next thing we're going to have to do is choose the right leadership seed. Here is a very practical statement. Consider the type of seed and what it will produce, and is that the right seed for you in the season? If you want corn, I can guarantee you better plant corn. If you want wheat, you need to plant wheat. And And that sounds like, so what are you saying? That's pretty obvious. Well, sometimes we don't apply that wisdom when we take a look and see what types of leaders we want to learn under or emulate. So, one of the first things I always tell people to do when they're considering serving a leader or enrolling in a program or joining some group, take a look at the leaders and don't just look at what they promise on the front end. Take a look at what is being produced by their work. Look around. Who's gone through that program? Who's working in that company? Who is involved in that initiative, whatever it might be? I would look at the character, track record. Is this person leading with integrity? Are they one of those who are always looking to develop the people on their team? Or are they one of those people we talked about a moment ago where they're not teachable? They're the ones who know it all. Look at the strength of the people on their team. Do they seem to be flourishing, or do they seem to be pushed in a corner? Look at their competence professionally. A lot of people can talk a good talk. A lot of people can get you excited on the front end about joining their team, joining their business, whatever it is you're considering doing. But you want to look beyond that. You want to discern on the front end as you hear the invitation. But you want to look at their character. You want to assess their credentials, and you want to assess what I call their sustainable yield. In other words, have they put something on the ground that's still there? Or was it a flash in the pan kind of thing? Or did they leave a long trail of bruised people in their wake and unfulfilled commitments? So don't let the charismatic personality of a leader swoop you into something if you have not done your due diligence. That's how you choose the right leadership seed. So we've prepared the soil to develop as a leader. We've chosen the leaders we want to learn under, the principles and types of teaching and type of initiative we want to engage with. And the next thing is to be ready to have a seed planted firmly. I told a story a few moments ago about reminiscing about planting seeds when I was a child and how excited we would be when the seeds popped up out of the ground the first day. And we would go to check them every day, planted flowers, watered them. And the day that they sprung up was always an exciting day. But you know, there were always a few seeds that had not been planted deep enough. And they were just very near the surface. And pretty soon what you would see as the growth sprung up is that they would fall over because the root structure could not go deep and sustain the growth. So if you've ever planted something, you may have observed the same thing. And we find that in our lives, the same principle is true. If I were to ask you how many fantastic ideas you've heard about how to be successful in your field, and if you took the time to make a list, I bet you could come up with 50 to 100 great books you've read, speakers you've heard, programs you've joined, where you heard many incredible things, but you did not put them into practice in this way that we're talking about as a seed firmly planted that could take root and sustain you. Now, I'm sure you have done some of that, and those are the kinds of examples we're talking about. If you are going to retain what you're learning, then you need to develop the capacity to hold it. You need to develop the depth of insight and preparation and infrastructure, I'm going to call it, where the learning can take root and where the root structure can be solidified in a secure manner so that the growth sustains. And so this causes us to think a little bit about how we prepare a depth of soil that will be required to nourish the seed that we're going to plant. We don't plant just to plant. Not really. We need to plant with a view of the harvest. We know that things that work against this are erosion, where nutrients are stripped from the ground and soil mass is blown away or swept away. And when that occurs in the physical, fields have to be restored, dirt has to be brought in, nutrients have to be applied. So as a leader who's in the developing mode as we all are, being lifelong learners, we need to prepare our mind and we need to prepare our heart to allow this leadership development to take deep root. I have heard many people lament the fact that nobody ever raised them up or took them under their wing. I hear adults of all ages say, I never had a mentor. I never really had anyone take me under their wing and train me in this or that. They are forever waiting that some wonderful, awesome leader they love would tap them on the shoulder and anoint them and call them out and say, here we go, this is going to be your big year, And all along, what's happened, if we take that attitude or that posture, we have let leadership school pass us by because we haven't realized we were in training all along through the good leaders and the terrible leaders and everything in between. And so a lot of what I want to do today is help you take ownership of your own leadership development and say, I want to grow as a leader no matter what I've done and how much I've accomplished. I want to take responsibility for my own journey. I want to develop a way in my heart and mind where the things I'm learning can take root and can be sustained over time to produce a sustainable yield. Often in my teaching, I refer to a lot of lessons that came to me through leading a startup group to create an entrepreneurial training center. And there were several facets to this that were very taxing and very invigorating all at the same time. This was one of those seasons where I was asking God for that new 10-year challenge, and boy, did he deliver on it. I found myself transition from the internship programs I was leading in the business department of a school into creating a corporate learning center for the needs to be met of all of our corporate training partners, largely chemical and gas, in a metroplex area, South Texas. Now, this sounded like a lot of fun to me because I got to start with a blank sheet of paper. How many of you know visionaries can fill up a blank sheet of paper in a heartbeat, and another one, and another one, and another one, but very few seem to take it into implementation. And so the thrill of this journey was that not only did I get to put the dream on paper, I got to fulfill it in such a way that we had incredible results. People traveled from around the world to try to understand. We had visitors from Japan. We had visitors from many foreign countries. We had over 150,000 participants come through and receive professional development training that advanced their careers and their lives and their progress. And in this time, I found that many of the leadership lessons I'd learned as a little girl just by being raised by the parents who loved me and taught me a lot of the practicals in life came to play in developing this corporate learning center. I found that as I connected the dots, the lessons that my husband and I had learned having a little sporting goods store right off the college campus in a South Texas hill country town where we really learned to buy and sell and work with customers and resolve conflicts and train up teams, again came to bear in the corporate learning center. I think part of what we need to do as leaders is begin connecting the dots. I've listened to a lot of people who are not satisfied with where they are in life because they don't think that's it. That's not where they want to be. They don't understand it's a data point on the map along the way. And so as we're preparing our hearts, so in our minds and our lives in order to receive the planting of a field, we're going to need to come to terms with some of these things. There's some mindsets we need to adapt. There are some shifts that we need to make in how we view things if we are going to be the ones who have the capacity for the planting to be sustained. So we've prepared soil, we've chosen seed, we've gotten ready to sustain the growth of the seed and the root structure. And now let's just take a moment and look at the season of the planting. There are various levels of leaders I mentioned a moment ago. Some are what we might call emerging leaders. These could be young people just getting into their careers. This could be people of any age who are transitioning and who are just now making the decision that they want to become a leader. So this is not bound by age or stage of life. There are others who are established leaders. They have something under their belt. They can point to this team they've developed, this business they have launched. They can point to this product or project team I was on where I brought something to fruition. And maybe their job title never had the word leader in it. You see what I'm saying? But they can look at what's in them and what they've done and say, I'm an established leader. I can lead. I can take a group of people, cast a vision, rally them around it, and put things in motion for implementation. So we would call this an established leader. And then we have executive leaders who are at the top of organizations or over certain operations that they are responsible for. So it's good to think about your season as a leader. Where am I? Where do I want to go? Not everybody wants to be an executive leader, and that is okay. We need people alive in their leadership at every level in the earth, functioning, alive in the Lord with the light on, coming to work and contributing every day. Contributing is a word I like to use because it shows that you have something to offer. And the person who says, I'm ready to contribute what I have to a situation, regardless of my title, regardless of whether the team leaders ask me or not, but I'm showing up with something to offer today and offering it in humility, this is a leader in the making to the next level. I want to see men and women in the marketplace who are so assured of who they are in the Lord that their definition of themselves is not bound by their job title or the particular place where they may be using their skills. If you get this right at this point in your life, wherever you might be in this description of levels, you will certainly be anchored as a person able to navigate whatever may come. You know, a lot of people come to me with questions about what's the economy doing? What are we to do? Should we store everything up and go hide in the woods? Should we buy this? Should we buy that? And, these are natural questions that come across our minds as we watch the struggles of our economy and as we hear various things in politics, that kind of thing. And here's what I always tell people. You are a priest. You are a priest. You don't need to come to me or anyone else for those answers. What you need to come to me for is to learn how to have your heart alive, to be on a growth track, to be ready to be hearing God and knowing God in every season, and learning to hear God for yourself, as He will give one person a particular instruction and another instruction depending on where He has you and what your realm of responsibility is. So choose leadership development that will work for you wherever you are, and give a little thought to where you are on your leadership track and where you want to go. Now, with all of this being said, it's going to take time. The soil is prepared to receive the seed. The seed of leadership is chosen and aligned. It is planted. And this is not our favorite part, but patience is then required for the laws of order to take place and the seed to grow with the passing of time. So don't get in too big a hurry. Give yourself a little margin. Give yourself a little buffer. Understand that what God is doing in you is something that's to last over what I call the long haul. You are on this earth for some number of years. God knows the number of our days. And here's something that kind of helps. You don't have to get it all done before you exit the planet. Now, you want to get a lot of it done, but as you study about the Lord's kingdom and the things He's going to be doing, I think there's a very strong connection between what you're doing here on this earth and what you'll do in the age to come. Now, that's a subject for another day. But what I would like to do is ask you now to begin seeing yourself as a leader, as a field to be planted, being one who is aligning your life and your resources for development, and owning the fact that you are a work in progress and that you are God's field to be planted. So let those thoughts go deep. Take some moments now to document questions that you have. And this brings us to the end of the first stage of your development of a field, and that is the planting stage.